Vover. What's up, guys? Welcome to a brand new episode of Debate DC. I'm Daniel Cormier. I am joined by Dakota right here. Dakota had a question on the Vover app, and he said to me, he goes, DC, my debate, or what I want to talk about, is 10-8 scores when the fight is predominantly standing. Now, we've seen a number of 10-8 rounds whenever a dominant grappler is on top, but we have not seen that in the striking. So, Dakota, what fight in particular made you wonder about that type of scoring?
Thanks, DC. So I was watching the Mackenzie Dern Marina Rodriguez fight, specifically the third round, where Dern had no answers on the feet for Rodriguez. 45-8, significant strike difference. She didn't even look like she was on the same planet as Rodriguez. And that made me wonder, what criteria would there have to be in order to make it a 10-8 round, or make those more common for a striking affair?
I think a lot of times when it comes to 10-8 rounds, judges are a bit tentative to give them because it changes the fight so much. Now, I don't have the Mackenzie Dern scorecard in front of me, right? So I don't know if she got a 10-8 in the second round, because it seemed as though she was as dominant on the mat as Marina was in the third round standing. But if I remember correctly, Mackenzie got to a lot of positions, never truly get into her position to get the finish in terms of submission. But Marina just kind of outstruck her and maintained her distance. It wasn't like she was just hitting her with things that were extremely damaging, but she was controlling all the interactions on the feet. She was leading the dance. She was the one starting all the exchanges. Now, the issue for me is this. In boxing, you go down 10-8. There's no question about it. But in MMA, you can get dropped and still lose around 10-9. I just think that there's no real standard for what a round looks like. And you speak to this fight with Mackenzie and Marina, you might think that's a 10-8 round, but I didn't necessarily agree. I was okay with it being 10-9 because it's not like she was landing anything damaging. I think that's criteria number one that needs to be taken into account, is that the damage has to be very, very easy to see if you want to get a 10-8 round while just standing up.
And I totally agree with that as well. And I think even in MMA, people are more willing to go to their back and play jiu-jitsu or play grappling than you would see in boxing, because it's a standing affair. So that's where my conundrum comes in a little bit too. I go back to the Holloway-Cater fight, and I think he had 2 10-8 rounds out of that whole fight. You could almost score that whole fight a 10-8 fight.
You could have did 10-7. He beat him so bad.
Exactly. That's a 4-to-1 striking ratio if you look at the numbers, and that's super extreme, and that's not something that you'll see every day. But with a guy like Khabib, who's so dominant on the ground, putting damage control, I wonder if there's anything you could put control wise and the striking criteria along with the damage that would encourage that more, or encourage more action from the other party to stop that from happening.
I think the issue is, like I said, it so changes the fight by giving a 10-8 that judges are hesitant to give him. I've seen Khabib dominate so many different fights. He beat Al Iaquinta 50-44. So they gave him 3. He had 10-8 rounds in that fight. He had 10-8 rounds in a lot of fights. Yep. But let me tell you one that sticks out to me that really does define the point and tells me that it's going to be very difficult for someone to score a 10-8 round when it's all standing. I got to be honest with you. I don't think we're going to see him very often. I really don't. I've seen guys get beat and girls get beat so badly and still lose a 10-9 round. I watched a fight very recently. I'm not exactly sure the name, but the guy got beat so bad in the first round. It was the kid from Alpha Male. He fought the same night as Macy Barber, when I thought that Macy Barber got a favorable decision. The kid from Alpha Male, same night, got beat so bad in round 1, somehow won the second and third round, and they didn't give that kid a 10-8 in the first round. That tells me that they are so scared to give that 10-8 round that they don't grant him. Now, here's the one that I think is the most severe case of not giving a 10-8, and that's why I believe for the fans and for the people who watch the sport that want to see more 10-8s, you might as well stop wasting your time. Because when Max Holloway fought Brian Ortega, he only got 1 10-8 round. In all those scorecards, he got one 10-8 round. And we saw how bad Max Holloway beat Brian Ortega. I don't think the champ Alexander Volkanovski got any 10-8 rounds against Brian Ortega because the fight is standing mostly. So if you see those types of fights and they aren't scoring them 10-8, my man Dakota, I don't think you're going to get 10-8 rounds. So I think for the stand-up people that love it, learn to love the grappling because it seems more dominant, or they got to kind of watch just boxing and kickboxing where it's a set standard. You fall down, you lose a point, and the round goes 10-8. Because in MMA, they ain't doing it.
And I totally agree. And I think also that the amount of rounds might have something to do with it being 3 or 5. Because one of those 10-8s, like you said, can easily dominate and change that entire fight. Because if you get dominated for 2 rounds on the ground after that, you know, it definitely would make that a little bit of a tougher decision. And I know you've talked a lot about how judging needs to be revamped and getting former fighters in there and stuff like that, I think would help out a lot. Maybe even make
I had a guy on
striking
here a
hold
couple
little
weeks
more
ago that told me that professional fighters aren't capable of judging fights. I had somebody on here, and this dude thinks that he won the debate against me, and he was over there saying that because you train with someone, you like them so much you cannot judge fairly. He thought that fighters are so petty that if you fought somebody before or trained with them, you would not be able to score a fight for them even if they were winning.
In that debate, I probably would have given you a 10-8 round because I just listened to that, and I don't agree. I think you could even have lower level MMA fighters that fought regionally come in and do a good job, but also top level guys, because who knows the game better than you.
Yep. So here's the question for me. Here's the question I got for you, Dakota. If you are put in charge of figuring this whole thing out with the 10-8 rounds for stand-up fights, because remember now, the other day when Marvin Vettori was fighting Paulo Costa, he got kicked in the head and he was rocked very badly. Would that look to you like a 10-8? Because if you make it a rule where if a guy's in trouble or a guy goes down, now it looks like this guy should be losing a 10-8 round, when the reality is Vettori fought so beautifully even after being hurt. So it's such a different me. When I fought Rumble dropped me in the first 10 seconds. Got up, I won the rest of the round. So is Rumble supposed to win a 10-8? That's like, those are the questions, because you can't make it so simple as to if you fall, you lose the round 10-8.
Well, that's why I think MMA is such a beautiful sport, right? Because Costa really couldn't seal the deal on Vettori after that because the recovery and the grappling helped him out so much. So I think that's where the quandary comes in at, with the 10-8 rounds. But I do agree it would be a pretty substantial Holloway Cater sort of situation where it's no contest to be able to score it that way.
But so what would you suggest the next step in judging would be? Because when I look at it, I have no idea, Dakota. I have no idea how to give a guy points for his offensive attack and a guy for defensively. Because at one point when Cater was throwing punches, Max is juking, jiving, dipping, turning. I think you should get points for showing effective defense too. But that's not a scoring criteria. For defending takedowns, you should get some sort of credit for that, but that's not a scoring criteria, right? So it's very unbalanced in terms of what the unified rules are.
And that's my train of thought as well, because I've thought, guys who like Corey Sandhagen, who defended a bunch of takedowns against Dillashaw, should have gotten credit for that in those rounds. So I think, like you alluded to with that debate with the guy and the judges, you have to take the boxing element out of it and give MMA its respect and its own point system and judges that see it from that point of view as well. And I think that's the only way to start having the conversation because it is so much more complex of a sport.
Absolutely. But for me, it's about really having an eye for what's happening out there. Yeah. For understanding that offensively, defensively, positioning, you got to know what's going on in there to score the fight effectively. If you don't know what you're watching, it's hard for you to really score it and judge it over the course of its entirety. And I think at times when you have people that aren't as striking oriented like myself, or a person that doesn't really understand the grappling and the little details in grappling as much as some other people. They don't know where to credit and deduct points from those scores when they're rendering their decisions. The reality is it's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to take for you to see more 10-8 round striking. I do believe there are some. I don't necessarily agree on the Rodriguez fight. I think that would still be a 10-9 round because she did win the majority of the striking exchanges. She won the fight. She won that round, but she also didn't really damage Mackenzie Dern as much as you saw Max damage Cater, as you saw Max damage Ortega, as you saw Volkanovski damage Ortega, as you've seen certain guys just get truly, his name is Holland Paiva. Holland Paiva lost so bad in round one that I thought there was no way that he would win that fight. I think it was against Kyler Phillips. I thought there was no way that he would win the fight. Ultimately, he got the decision. So I think that we just have to gain more knowledge. And as the sport continues to evolve, people will become more knowledgeable. The judging will become more advanced, and we will start to see people more willing. Because the reality is the length of the fight, how short the fight is, should not hurt the fact that you're putting on a dominating performance over the course of 3 or 5 rounds, whether it's standing, whether it's grappling. You should be credited for all the work that you do. And if it's 10-8, it's 10-8. And I do believe that they've done better. They've done better at giving 10-8 rounds today. But there are still some head scratchers out there, man, where you think it should be. You don't know how it became. And you're just sitting there kind of wondering what's happening.
Yes, sir. I totally agree, DC.
My man, Dakota, thank you so much for joining me, man. I know, guys, this wasn't as contentious. This wasn't as me and him yelling at each other. But I picked Dakota because I wanted to hear his thoughts on what can we do to raise the value of an excellent striking performance. Because there are many, many times where I believe athletes should receive their just due. Give them their roses. Hey, sometimes you give me my roses by just giving me that 10-8. Because that 10-8 almost makes it impossible for me to lose the fight. Dakota, thank you so much for joining me, my friend. Guys, I will see you next week with another Debate DC. Go to the Vover app. Put your questions. I will answer those questions, but also I'll pick one of you to come and sit across from me. Look, I'm in a good mood right now. I'm tired. I flew all the way to Abu Dhabi. I flew to New York, 6 hours, then 12 hours to Abu Dhabi. I'm exhausted. I golfed this morning. Dakota got lucky. I'm feeling pretty generous today. That's why I didn't smash this dude like my boy Habib has done to so many. So I'm feeling generous. But Dakota, thank you for joining me. Guys, download the Vover app. Submit those questions. And make sure you tune into Debate DC across all the podcast platforms and on the Vover YouTube channel. Let's go.